Welcome to the HR Spoonfuls podcast, brought to you by Andera HR, the home of helpdesk4hr.com and AI for HRhub.com, where you can find assistance from qualified human resources professionals and learn about all things related to the use of artificial intelligence solutions for your HR department. Now listen in as your AI-driven hosts, Alex and Ivy, discuss interesting and current human resources topics, one spoonful at a time.
Ever feel like you're stuck playing a board game and like everyone else somehow got the rule book except you?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
That's kind of what it feels like with FMLA for a lot of people, right?
It really does.
So we're diving right into that today.
Yeah.
The Family and Medical Leave Act, breaking it down, what it is, who it's actually for, and why it should matter to you even if you think right now you'll never need it.
You'd be surprised, actually, how many people have these, misconceptions about FMLA. They just kind of assume they're covered, and it turns out they're not. Or they miss out on benefits because they didn't even realize they qualified in the first place.
And we are fixing that right here, right now. And thankfully, we've got the official guide from the Department of Labor. Let me tell you, it is way more interesting than I thought it would be.
It's really well written, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so first things first, who is this even for?
Well, it's not as simple as just, do you work for a big company? The FMLA, it's very specific. It covers what they call covered employers. So in the private sector, that usually means you're looking at businesses with 50 or more employees for at least 20 weeks of the year. And here's the thing. It's the current or previous year, so keep that in mind.
So even if your company right now seems kind of small, how they were staffed in the past could mean, hello, FMLA rights you had no clue about.
Exactly.
And this whole thing with temp agencies kind of blew my mind.
Oh, yeah.
You might actually be considered an employee of the agency in the place where they're sending you to work.
Exactly. Imagine that, right? You're a temp worker, and then suddenly you realize you've got potentially double the FMLA protection.
That's huge.
That's huge. It really highlights why it's so important to, really look at your specific employment situation. Even if at first glance you're thinking, nah, FMLA doesn't apply to me.
It's like finding out your grandma's dusty old attic is actually full of treasure.
Oh, right.
But, okay, let's say my company, they do meet that size requirement.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm automatically good to go if I need to take leave?
Not so fast. So your company size, yeah, that's important, but you as the individual employee, you still have to meet specific eligibility requirements too. So it's kind of like a two-step verification.
Okay, so what are those hurdles? What gets me eligible for FMLA?
All right, so for starters, you got to have worked for that employer for at least 12 months. But good news, those 12 months don't have to be consecutive.
Okay, that's a relief. So even if I took some time on, say, to finally travel the world or finish that novel that's been in my drawer, I might still be eligible.
Exactly. Life happens, right? And the FMLA gets that. So on top of that 12-month requirement, you also need to have worked at least 12,250 hours during those 12 months leading up to needing that leave.
So we're talking like actual hours worked, not just like time on the payroll. Like my epic 3-week vacation to finally see the Galapagos Islands doesn't count toward that 1,250.
You got it. It's about the time that you've actively, been there contributing to your workplace. And this applies whether you're full-time, part-time, even seasonal. Every hour counts towards that 12,250.
This is making me think I need to brush up on my own employment history here. Okay, so we've tackled the who has covered the employer, the employee. What about the reasons? When can you actually use FMLA?
Now we're getting into it.
Right, to the good stuff.
The nitty-gritty.
Nitty-gritty.
Yeah. The FMLA, it outlines, very specific situations where you are fully entitled to take leave. And it might surprise you how many, life events actually fall under that FMLA umbrella.
I think when most people think FMLA, they probably think having a baby or maybe needing to care for, a sick family member.
You're right. Those are definitely some of the most common scenarios for sure. The FMLA allows you to take time for the birth of a child and to bond with that newborn for that first year. And it also covers welcoming a child through adoption or even foster care because, again, that bonding period, so crucial.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's recognizing that becoming a parent, however you get there, it requires some adjustment time.
Yeah.
It requires time to build those bonds as a family. But what about when you're the one who needs the care?
Covered.
Okay.
That is covered as well. The FMLA lets you take that leave for your own serious health condition if it's something that prevents you from doing your job. And this includes, by the way, incapacity due to pregnancy or even just needing prenatal care.
Oh, that's essential to clarify because it's not just about, like, caring for others.
Yeah.
Your own well-being, very valid reason to use FMLA. And I was really glad to see that the guide even mentions mental health here.
Absolutely. Mental health is health, period.
Yeah.
The law recognizes that those conditions, they can be just as debilitating, just as serious as any physical ailment.
And then there's this whole section on, like, military family leave, which, I'll be honest, I kind of almost skimmed over it at first.
Yeah.
But then I was like, wait a minute. Like, this is huge for military families, and we're talking about situations that I think most people wouldn't even consider.
It's true. Military families, they face such unique challenges, and the FMLA really tries to address those. So, for instance, you can take leave for what they call qualifying exigencies that come up when your spouse, your child, your parent is on active duty or called up.
Qualifying exigencies. See, now that sounds like legal jargon to me. What does that actually mean in, like, real-world terms?
So it basically means those urgent kind of situations that pop up because of a military deployment, things that a family member has to handle, like, right now.
So, like, if you need to arrange last-minute childcare, if you have to wrangle legal paperwork, if you need someone to, like, manage the family finances before deployment.
Exactly. Or even, like, attending military ceremonies or briefings, or even just, spending time with that service member if they're on rest and recuperation leave.
Yeah.
These are moments that matter.
Yeah, being there for those transitions. And there's another type of military leave too, right? Something to do with caring for a wounded service member.
That's called military caregiver leave, and it's specifically for caring for a covered service member who's been seriously injured, become ill. It allows you to take up to 26 work weeks in a single 12-month period.
Wow. 26 weeks. That's more than double the typical FMLA entitlement.
It is, and for good reason. These families are dealing with, unimaginable challenges, and they need that time to provide that care and support.
It's recognizing the immense sacrifice, not just of the service member, but of, like, the entire family unit in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about who was covered. We've talked about all those different reasons that someone might qualify. Now, I think the big question, what is a serious health condition in the eyes of the FMLA?
That's where it can get a little tricky. It gives examples like inpatient care, ongoing treatment, pregnancy, chronic conditions, but it's not an exhaustive list, right? Every situation is so unique.
So how do you know? How do you know if yours meets that bar? What are they looking at?
The key word is incapacity, meaning you are unable to work, attend school, or handle your normal day-to-day activities because of this health condition or the health condition of, that family member that you're caring for.
So something like, a quick doctor's visit because you've got a cold. That's probably not going to cut it. But, needing ongoing physical therapy after an injury, something more intense like that.
Exactly. Imagine scenarios like you're undergoing chemo, you require multiple treatments, you need regular prescription medication to manage a condition, things like that. Those could all potentially qualify.
And it's important to, again, remember this applies to both physical and mental health conditions, right?
Absolutely. It's all about how that condition, whatever it may be, how it impacts your ability to function.
What about those kind of in-between situations where maybe you're not completely incapacitated, but you might need to, like, adjust your work schedule or take time off intermittently?
That's where intermittent leave or reduced schedule leave comes in. And the FMLA does allow for that flexibility, which can be a lifesaver for a lot of people.
I imagine there's probably, some extra guidelines around that, though. Maybe you need, like, more detailed documentation from your doctor.
Yeah, you're on the right track. Your employer might ask for a medical certification that spells out, why that intermittent leave is medically necessary. Gives an estimate, maybe, of how often you'll need it for how long.
Okay. This is starting to sound like we're wading into paperwork territory now.
Yeah.
What other forms or, like, notices should people be prepared for when we're talking about FMLA?
Don't worry, we'll walk you through the essentials. There are specific forms for designating FMLA leave, for certifying that serious health condition, even, a fitness for duty form that some employers might require when you're ready to come back to work.
A fitness for duty. That sounds kind of, like, intense. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah, it's essentially a way for your employer to make sure that you are okay. You can safely resume your job duties after you've been away, but they can't just demand it. There are very specific rules that they have to follow.
Rules are good, especially when you're dealing with something as important as, like, your job, your health. So let's talk about those rules. What are some of the, just like the key things that both employees and employers need to know about how FMLA leave actually works in practice?
First and foremost, deadlines. They apply to everyone involved. There are deadlines for when you need to notify your employer about needing leave, when they have to respond to that request, when you need to submit medical certifications, so on and so forth. And those deadlines, by the way, can vary a bit depending on whether the need for leave is foreseeable or not.
Foreseeable versus unforeseeable.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So if you know you're scheduled for like a surgery in a couple of months, that's foreseeable. If you have a sudden illness, injury, that's unforeseeable.
You got it. And the amount of notice that you're expected to give your employer will be a little bit different in those situations.
What about situations where, on top of maybe needing FMLA, you might also be eligible for other things like short-term disability, workers' comp? How does that all kind of mesh with FMLA?
That is an excellent question, and it's definitely where things can get, The word of the day is complicated. FMLA does not exist in a vacuum. It intersects with other leave policies, with benefits programs. It's like this whole web.
Yeah, it's like a Venn diagram of workplace protections.
Exactly.
And you got to know how they all overlap.
You do, and the guide really gets into the weeds on this, so don't worry.
Okay, good.
It talks about how FMLA interacts with paid sick leave, with vacation time, even military service leave, and it covers things like what happens to your health insurance while you're on FMLA.
Ooh, what does happen to your health insurance?
Yeah.
Because that is something I would love to know more about.
Major piece of the puzzle. The guide, it lays out things like how much notice your employer has to give you before they could even think about dropping your coverage for non-payment, what portion of your premiums you're responsible for while you're on leave, all of that.
It's like, I don't know, someone finally like sat down and explained all that fine print on a contract that we all kind of signed but like didn't really understand,
No. Yeah.
We've unpacked a lot about FMLA.
Yeah.
Who it covers, what actually qualifies you to use it, even those like specific situations with military families, how it all overlaps with your other benefits. But I'm curious, what does this all really boil down to for like the average person? If I'm listening to this right now, why should I care about FMLA, even if I'm thinking, I don't think I need it right now?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I think the biggest takeaway here is that FMLA, it's a safety net. It's there to protect you during these major life events. The birth of a child, you go through a personal health crisis, you need to care for a loved one. It's about knowing that you can take that time, that you need that time, without the added worry of, am I going to lose my job?
It's that sense of security when everything else feels like it's totally up in the air.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just job security, too. FMLA protects your access to your health insurance and other benefits while you're on leave, which is huge when you think about the potential, financial burden of these types of situations.
Yeah, that part about health insurance, that really surprised me. I had no idea there were such specific rules around how premiums are handled during FMLA leave, who pays what, and the fact that under certain circumstances, an employer could even drop your coverage. I mean, wild.
Yeah, and it's a very common pain point that people have. They get anxious about the money part of it. They worry about keeping up with premiums or what happens if they can't return to work right away.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're already dealing with a health crisis or trying to be there for someone you love. That's the last thing you need, is that added financial stress. So knowing your rights, knowing your options, that can make a world of difference.
For sure. When you understand the rules of the game, you can make those informed decisions, and you can advocate for yourself more effectively, too.
So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, this is all great, but honestly, I'm not even sure if I qualify for FMLA. Where do I even, go from here?
Honestly, don't hesitate. Reach out to your HR department or talk to a legal professional, someone who specializes in, employment law. They can help you look at your individual situation, walk you through the whole process. Remember, knowledge is power, right? And it's always better to have the information, even if you end up not needing to use it.
And don't forget, the Department of Labor website, they have a ton of resources on this. Fact sheets, FAQs, even those optional forms you can use for actually requesting leave or providing that medical certification to your employer.
Here's a final thought for you. Even if you're sitting there thinking, nope, my situation not covered by FMLA, it's still worth having that conversation with your employer. You might be surprised at how willing they are to work with you, whether it's through other company policies, maybe a more flexible arrangement, or even just open communication and support.
Yeah, it's about keeping that line of communication open and, advocating for what you need. You never know what options might be out there unless you ask.
Exactly. Communication is key.
This has been, I think, a really eye-opening deep dive into FMLA.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you feel a little bit more ready to go out there and navigate this, honestly, often very confusing territory. And remember, knowing your rights can make all the difference. And the good news is there are resources to help guide you every step of the way. Until next time, happy diving, everyone.
Thanks for listening to HR Spoonfuls. For more episodes like this one, drop by helpdeskforhr.com or AIforHRhub.com and subscribe to our newsletter to receive HR updates and notices when new podcast episodes are posted. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and will join us again soon.